Chapter 11. Anna Whitney met them out the door. Her hands fluttered, then gripped together at her waist. "Jack, what's happening?" "Linda's here. She said you called her and told her I needed counsel." Her gaze darted from Eve to Feeney, then back to her husband. "Why would I need counsel?" "It's all right." He put a tense but protective hand on her shoulder. "Let's go inside, Anna." "But I haven't done anything." She managed one nervous laugh. "I haven't even gotten a traffic ticket lately." "Just sit down, honey." "Linda, thanks for coming so quickly." "No problem." The Whitney's attorney was young, sharp-eyed, and polished to a gleam. It took Eve several moments to remember she was also their daughter. "Lieutenant Dallas, isn't it?" Linda scanned and summed up quickly. "I recognize you." She gestured to chair before either of her parents thought of it. "Please sit." "Captain Feeney, EDD." "Yes, my father's mentioned you many times, Captain Feeney." Now she laid a hand over her mother's. "What's this all about?" "Information has just come to light that needs clarification." Eve took out her recorder, offered it to Linda for examination. She tried not to think that Linda favored her father. The caramel-colored skin, the cool eyes, genes and family traits both fascinated and frightened her. "I take it this is going to be a formal interview." With careful calm, Linda set the recorder on the table and took out her own. "That's right." Eve recited the date and time. "Interviewing Officer Dallas, Lieutenant Eve. Also present, Whitney, Commander Jack, and Feeney, Captain Ryan." Interviewee Whitney, Anna, represented by counsel. Whitney, Linda, "My client is aware of all rights and agrees to this time and place of interview. Counsel reserves the right to terminate at her discretion." "Proceed, Lieutenant." "Mrs. Whitney," Eve began, "you're acquainted with Cicely Towers, deceased?" "Yes, of course." "Is this about Cicely?" Jack he only shook his head and kept his hand on her shoulder. "You are also acquainted with the deceased's family, her former husband Marco Angelini, her son, David Angelini, and her daughter, Myrina." "I'm more than acquainted. Her children are like family." "Why, Linda even dated a mom." With the bolstering smile, Linda interrupted. "Just answer the question. Don't elaborate." "But this is ridiculous." Some of Anna's puzzlement edged over into irritation. It was her home, after all, her family. Lieutenant Dallas already knows the answers. "I'm sorry to go over the same ground." "Mrs. Whitney, would you describe your relationship with David Angelini?" "David? Why, I'm his godmother. I watched him grow up." "You're aware that David Angelini was in financial distress prior to the death of his mother?" "Yes, he was." A broken bar. Her eyes went huge. "You don't seriously believe that?" "David, a broken bar? That's hideous." She snapped it out before her mouth compressed into a thin red line. "I'm not going to dignify this with an answer." "I understand you feel protective toward your godson, Mrs. Whitney. I understand you would go to some lengths to protect him, and to some expense. $200,000. Anna's face whitened under her careful cosmetics. "I don't know what you mean." "Mrs. Whitney, do you deny paying to David Angelini the sum of $200,000, in installments of $50,000 over a 4-month period, beginning in February of this year and ending in May?" A broken bar. She clutched at her daughter's hand, avoided her husband's. "Do I have to answer that, Linda?" "A moment please, to confer with my client." Briskly, Linda scooped an arm around her mother and led her into the next room. "You're very good, Lieutenant," Whitney said tightly. "It's been some time since I observed one of your interviews." "Jack," Feeney sighed, "hurting for everyone." "She's doing her job." "Yes, she is. It's what she's best at." He looked over as his wife came back into the room. She was pale, trembling a little. The burning in his gut flared. "We'll continue," Linda said. There was a warrior glint in her eye when she focused on Eve. "My client wishes to make a statement." "Go ahead, Mom. It's all right." "I'm sorry." Tears started on her lashes. "Jack, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. He was in trouble." "I know what you said, but I couldn't help it." "It's all right." Resigned, he took the hand that reached out for his and stood beside her. "Tell the lieutenant the truth, and we'll deal with it." "I gave him the money." "Did he threaten you, Mrs. Whitney?" "What?" Shock seemed to dry up the tears swimming in her eyes. "Oh my goodness." "Of course he didn't threaten me. He was in trouble," she repeated, as if that should be enough for anyone. He owed a very great deal of money to the wrong kind of people. His business, that portion of his father's business that he oversaw, was in some temporary upheaval, and he had a new project he was trying to get off the ground. He explained it, she added with a wave of her free hand. I don't remember precisely. I don't bother overmuch with business. Mrs. Whitney, you gave him 4 payments of $50,000. You didn't relay this information to me in our other interviews. What business of yours was it? Her spine was back, snapped hard and cold so that she sat like a statue. It was my money, and a personal loan to my godchild. A godchild, Eve said with straining patience, who was being questioned in a murder investigation, his mother's murder. You might as well accuse me of killing her as David. You didn't inherit a sizable portion of your estate. Now, you listen to me. Anger suited her. Anna's face glowed as she leaned forward. That boy adored his mother, and she him. He was devastated by her death. I know. I sat with him. I comforted him. You gave him $200,000. It was my money to do with as I chose. She bit her lip. No one would help him. His parents refused, then agreed to refuse this time. I spoke with Cicely about it months ago. She was a wonderful mother, and she loved her children, but she was a very strong believer in discipline. She was determined that he had to handle his problem on his own, without her help, without mine. But when he came to me, desperate, what was I to do? What was I to do? She demanded, turning to her husband. Jack, I know you told me to stay out of it, but he was terrified, afraid they would cripple him, even kill him. What if it had been Linda, or Stephen? Wouldn't you have wanted someone to help? Anna, feeding his problem isn't help. He was going to pay me back, she insisted. He wasn't going to gamble with it. He promised. He only needed to buy some time. I couldn't turn him away. Lieutenant Dallas, Linda began. My client lent her own money to a family member in good faith. There was no crime in that. Your client hasn't been charged with a crime, counselor. Did you, in any of your previous interviews, ask my client directly about disposition of funds? Did you ask my client if she had any financial dealings with David Angelini? No, I did not. Then she is not required to volunteer such information, which would appear to be personal and unconnected to your investigation. To the best of her knowledge, she's a cop's wife, Eve said wearily. Her knowledge ought to be better than most. Mrs. Whitney, did Cicely Towers argue with her son over money, over his gambling, over his debts and the settlement thereof? She was upset. Naturally they argued. Families argue. They don't hurt each other. Maybe not in your cozy little world, Eve thought. Your last contact with Angelini? A week ago. He called to make sure I was all right, that Jack was all right. We discussed plans for setting up a memorial scholarship fund in his mother's name. His idea, Lieutenant, she said with swimming eyes. He wanted her to be remembered. What can you tell me about his relationship with Yvonne Metcalf, the actress? Anna's eyes went blank before she dabbed at them. Did he know her? He never mentioned it. It had been a shot in the dark, and hadn't found a target. Thank you. Eve picked up her recorder, logged in the end of the interview. Counselor, you should advise your client that it would be in her best interest not to mention this interview or any portion of it to anyone outside this room. I'm a cop's wife. Anna neatly tossed Eve's words back in her face. I understand the drill. The last glimpse Eve had of the commander as she stepped outside, he was holding his wife and daughter. Eve wanted a drink. By the time she'd logged out for the day, she had spent the better part of the afternoon chasing after David Angelini's tail. He was in a meeting. He was out of contact. He was anywhere but where she looked. Without any other choice, she'd left messages at every possible point on the planet and figured she'd be lucky to hear from him before the following day. Meanwhile, she was faced with an enormous, empty house and a butler who hated the air she breathed. The impulse struck as she zipped through the gates. She grabbed her car. Lincoln ordered Mavis's number. Your night off, right? She asked the instant Mavis's face blipped on screen. You bet. God arrest those vocal cords. Plans? Nothing that can't be tossed out for better. What do you have in mind? Rourke's off planet. You want to come over here and hang? Stay over, get drunk, hang at Rourke's, stay over at Rourke's, get drunk at Rourke's. I'm on my way. Wait, Wait, let's do it up big. I'll send a car for you. A limo. Mavis forgot her vocal cords and squealed. Jesus, Dallas, make sure the driver wears, like, a uniform. The people in my building will be hanging out the windows with their eyes popped out. 15 minutes. Eve broke transmission and all but danced up the steps to the door. Somerset was there, just as expected, and she sent him a haughty nod. She'd been practicing. I'm having a friend over for the evening. Send a car and driver to 28th Avenue C. A friend. His voice was ripe with suspicion. That's right, Somerset. She glided up the stairs. A very good, very close friend. Be sure and tell the cook there'll be 2 for dinner. She managed to get out of earshot before doubling over with laughter. Somerset was expecting a tryst, she was sure, but it was going to be even more of a scandal when he got a load of Mavis. Mavis didn't disappoint her, though for Mavis, she was conservatively dressed. Her hair de jour was rather tame, a glittery gold fashioned in what was called a half-swing. One glistening side curved to her ear while the other half skimmed her shoulder. She'd only worn perhaps a half-dozen very dear rings, and all in her ears. A distinguished look for Mavis Freestone. She stepped out of a torrential spring downpour, handing a speechless Somerset her transparent cloak strung with tiny lights, and turned 3 circles. More, Eve thought, in awe of the hallway than to show off her skin-hugging red bodysuit. Wow, my thoughts exactly, Eve said. She'd hovered near the hallway waiting, not wanting Mavis to face Somerset alone. The strategy was obviously unnecessary, as the usually disdainful butler was struck dumb. It's just Mag, Mavis said in reverent tones. Really, Mag? And you've got the whole digs to yourself? Eve sent Somerset a cool, sidelong glance. Just about decent. With the flutter of inch-long lashes, Mavis held out a hand with interlinking hearts tattooed on the back. And you must be Somerset. I've heard so much about you. Somerset took the hand, so staggered he nearly lifted it to his lips before he remembered himself. Madam, he said stiffly. Oh, you just call me Mavis. Great place to work. Huh? You must get a hard charge out of it. Unsure if he was appalled or enchanted, Somerset stepped back, managed a half-bow, and disappeared down the hall with her dripping cloak. A man of few words. Mavis winked, giggled, then clattered down the hall on 6-inch inflatable platforms, and let out a sensual groan at the first doorway. You've got the real fireplace, a couple dozen of them, I think. Jesus. Do you do it in front of the fire, like in the old flicks? I'll leave that up to your imagination. I can imagine. Good Christ, Dallas, that car you sent, a real limo, a classic. It just had to be raining. She whirled back, sending her earrings dancing. Only about half the people I wanted to impress saw me. What are we going to do first? We can eat. I'm starving. But I've got to see the place first. Show me something. Eve pondered. The roof terrace was incredible, but it was raining furiously. The weapon room was out, as was the target range. Eve considered those areas off-limits to guests without Rourke's presence. There was plenty more, of course. Dubiously Eve studied Mavis's shoes. Can you really walk in those? They're air-glided. I hardly know I've got them on. All right then. We'll take the stairs. You'll see more that way. She took Mavis to the solarium first, amused by her friend's drop-jaw reaction to the exotic plants and trees, the sparkling waterfalls, and chattering birds. The curved glass wall was battered with rain, but through it the lights of New York gleamed. In the music room, Eve programmed a trash band and let Mavis entertain her with a glass-shattering short set of current favorites. They spent an hour in the game room, competing with the computer, each other, and hologram opponents at Free Zone and Apocalypse. Mavis did a lot of oohing and ahhing over the bedrooms, and finally chose the suite for her overnight stay. I can have a fire if I want. Mavis ran a possessive hand over the rich lapis lazuli of the hearth. Sure. But it is nearly June. I don't care if I roast. Arms out, she took long swinging steps over the floor, gazed up through the sky dome, and plopped down on the lake-sized bed with its thick silver cushions. I feel like a queen. No, an empress. She rolled over and over while the floating mattress undulated beneath her. How do you stay normal in a place like this? I don't know. I haven't lived here very long. Still rolling lavishly from one side of the air cushions to the other, Mavis laughed. It would only take me one night. I'm never going to be the same. Scooting up to the padded headboard, she punched buttons. Lights flickered on and off, revolved, sparkled. Music throbbed, pulsed. Water began to run in the next room. What's that? You programmed your bath. Eve informed her. Oops, not yet. Mavis flicked it off, tried another, and had the panel on the far wall sliding open to reveal a 10-foot video screen. Definitely decent. Wanna eat? While Eve settled in the dining room with Mavis, enjoying her first full evening off in weeks, Nadine first scowled over the editing of her next broadcast. I want to enhance that. Freeze on Dallas. She ordered a tech. Yeah, bring her up. She looks damn good on camera. Sitting back, she studied the 5 screens while the tech worked the panel. Editing room 1 was quiet, but for the murmuring clash of voices from the screen. For Nadine, putting images together seamlessly was as exciting as sex. The majority of broadcasters left the process to their techs, but Nadine wanted her hand in here. Everywhere. In the newsroom 1 level down, it would be bedlam. She enjoyed that, too. The scurry to beat the competition to the latest sound bite, the latest picture, the most immediate angle. Reporters manning their A-links for one more quote, bumping their computers for that last bit of data. The competition wasn't all outside on Broadcast Avenue. There was plenty of it right in the Channel 75 newsroom. Everybody wanted the big story, the big picture, the big ratings. Right now, she had it all. And Nadine didn't intend to lose it. There, hold it there. When I'm standing on Metcalf's patio. Yeah, now try a split screen. Use the shot of me on the sidewalk where Towers bought it. Eyes narrowed, she studied the image. She looked good, she decided. Dignified, sober-eyed, our intrepid, clear-sighted reporter, revisiting the scenes of the crimes. Okay. She folded her hands and rested her chin on them. Cue in the voiceover. 2 women, talented, dedicated, innocent. 2 lives brutally ended. The city reels, looks over its shoulder, and asks why. Loving families mourn, bury their dead, and ask for justice. There is one person working to answer that question, to meet that demand. Freeze, Nadine ordered. Bleed to Dallas. Exterior courtroom shot. Bring up audio. Eve's image filled the screens, full length, with Nadine beside her. That was good, Nadine thought. The visual lent the impression they were a team, working together. Couldn't hurt. There had been the faintest of breezes, ruffling their hair. Behind them, the courthouse speared up, a monument to justice, its elevators busily gliding up and down, its glass walkway crowded with people. My job is to find a killer, and I take my job seriously. When I finish mine, the courts begin theirs. Perfect. Nadine fisted her hand. Oh yes, just perfect. Fade it there, and I'll pick it up on live. Time? 3:45. Louise, I'm a genius, and you're not so bad yourself. Print it. Printed. Louise swiveled away from the console and stretched. They'd worked together for 3 years and were friends. It's a good piece, Nadine. Damn right it is. Nadine angled her head. But, okay. Louise released her stubby ponytail and ran a hand through her thick, dark curls. We're getting close to retreading here. We've had nothing new in a couple of days. Neither has anybody else. And I've got Dallas. And that's a big one. Louise was a pretty woman. Soft-featured, bright-eyed. She'd come to Channel 75 direct from college. After less than a month on the job, Nadine had scooped her up as her main tech. The arrangement suited them both. She's got a solid visual and an excellent throat. The Rourke factor adds a gold edge. That's not including the fact she's got a rep as a good cop. So, I'm thinking, continued Louise, until you get some new bites on this, you might want to splice in some of the business from the Dublas case. Remind people our lieutenant broke one of the big ones. Took a hit in the line of duty. Build up confidence. I don't want to take the focus off the current investigation. Maybe you do. Louise disagreed. At least until there's a new lead, or a new victim. Nadine grinned. A little more blood would heat things up. Another couple of days, we'll be out of the sweeps and into the June doldrums. Okay, I'll keep it in mind. You might want to put something together. Louise cocked a brow. I might. And if I use it, you get full on-air credit. You greedy bitch. Deal. Louise tapped the pocket of her editing vest. winced. Out of smokes. You've got to stop that. You know how the brass feel about employees taking health risks. I'm sticking with the herb shit. Shit's right. Get me a couple while you're at it. Nadine had the grace to look sheepish and keep it to yourself. They're tougher on the on-air talent than you tax. You've got some time before the midnight recap. Aren't you going to take your break? No. I've got a couple of calls to make. Besides, it's boring out. Nadine patted her perfectly coiffed hair. You go. She reached into her bag. I'll pay. Good delay since I have to go all the way to Second to find a store that's licensed to sell smokes. Resigned, she rose. I'm using your raincoat. Go ahead. Nadine passed her a handful of credits. Just put my share in the pocket, okay? I'll be in the newsroom. They walked out together, with Louise bundling into the stylish blue coat. Nice material. Sheds water like a duck. They crossed the rampway, past the series of editing and production rooms, and walked toward a descending people glide. Noise began to filter through, so Nadine pitched her voice over it. Are you and Bongo still thinking of taking the big step? Thinking hard enough that we've started looking at apartments. We're going the traditional route. We'll give living together a try for a year. If it works, we'll make it legal. Better you than me, Nadine said with feeling. I can't think of a single reason why a rational person would lock themselves to another rational person. Love. Louise put a dramatic hand to her heart. It makes reason and rationality fly out the old window. You're young and free, Louise, and if I'm lucky, I'm going to be old and chained to Bongo. Who the hell wants to be chained to anybody named Bongo? Nadine muttered. Me. Catch you later. With a quick salute, Louise continued on the descent while Nadine stepped off toward the newsroom. And thinking of Bongo, Louise wondered if she'd be able to get home before 1 a.m. It was their night at her place. That was a little inconvenience that would end once they found one suitable apartment rather than shifting back and forth between his rooms and hers. Idly, she glanced over at one of the many monitors lining the walls, playing Channel 75's current broadcast. Right now it was a popular sitcom, a dead medium that had been revived over the past couple of years by talent such as Yvonne Metcalf's. Louise shook her head over that thought, then chuckled a little as the life-sized actor on screen mugged outrageously for the viewing audience. Nadine might have been married to the news, but Louise liked sheer entertainment. She looked forward to those rare evenings when she and Bongo could cuddle up in front of the screen. In Channel 75's wide lobby there were more monitors, security stations, and a pleasant sitting area ringed with holograms of the station's stars, and, of course, a gift shop stocked with souvenir t-shirts, hats, signed mugs, and holograms of the station's biggest stars. Twice a day, between the hours of 10 and 4, tours were guided through the station. Louise had taken one herself as a child, had gawked with the best of them, and had, she remembered with a smug smile, decided then and there on her career. She waved to the guard at the front entrance, detoured to the east end, which was the shortest route to Second. At the side door for employees, she passed her palm over the handplate to deactivate the lock. As the door swung open, she winced at the heavy sound of drumming rain. She almost changed her mind. Was one sneaky smoke worth the 2 blocks sprint through the cold and damp? Damn right, she thought and flipped up the hood. The good, expensive raincoat would keep her dry enough, and she'd been stuck in editing with Nadine for more than an hour. Hunching her shoulders, she bolted outside. The wind kicked so that she broke her stride just long enough to secure the coat at the waist. Her shoes were soaked before she reached the bottom of the steps, and looking down at them, she swore under her breath. Well, shit. They were the last words she spoke. A movement caught her attention and she looked up, blinking once to clear the rain from her eyes. She never saw the knife, already in an arching slash, glint wetly in the rain then slice viciously across her throat. The killer studied her for only a moment, watched the blood fountain, the body collapse like a puppet cut from its strings. There was shock, then anger, then a quick, jittering fear. The gored knife hurried back into a deep pocket before the darkly clad figure ran off into the shadows. I think I could live like this. After a meal of rare Montana beef accented with lobsters harvested from Icelandic waters, washed down with French champagne, Mavis lounged in the lush indoor lagoon off the solarium. She yawned, blissfully naked and just a little drunk. You are living like this. Sort of. Not quite as free-spirited as Mavis, Eve wore a snug one-piece tank suit. She'd cozied herself on a smooth seat made of stone, and was still drinking. She hadn't allowed herself to relax to this extent in too long to remember. I don't really have a lot of time for this part of it. Make time, babe. Mavis submerged, popped up again, perfect round breasts gleaming in the showy blue lights she'd programmed. Lazily, she paddled over to a water lily, gave a sniff. Christ, this is the real thing. Do you know what you've got here, Dallas? Indoor swimming? What you've got? Mavis began as she frog-kicked her way over to the float that held her glass. Is a grade 1 fantasy, the kind you can't get from the top-line VR goggles. She took a long sip of icy champagne. You're not going to get all weirded out and blow it, are you? What are you talking about? I know you. You'll pick it apart, question everything, analyze. Noting Eve's glass was empty, Mavis did the honors. Well, I'm telling you, pal, don't. I don't pick things apart. You're the champion pick it apart. Damn it. Pick it aparter. Phew. Try saying that 5 times fast when your tongue's numb. She used a bare hip to nudge Eve over and squeezed in next to her. He's crazy about you, isn't he? Eve jerked her shoulders and drank. He's rich, I mean mag-rich, gorgeous as a god. And that body, what do you know about his body? I got eyes. I use AM. I've got a pretty good idea of what he looks like naked. Amused by the glint in Eve's eyes, Mavis licked her lips. Of course, anytime you want to fill in the missing details, I'm here for you. What a pal. That's me. Anyway, he's all that stuff. Then there's that power trip. He's got all that power. Sort of shoots out from him. She highlighted the statement by splashing up water. And he looks at you like he could eat you alive. In big a broken bar bites. Shit, I'm getting hot. Keep your hands off me. Mavis snorted. Maybe I'll go seduce Somerset. I don't think he has a dick. Bet I could find out. But she was just too lazy at the moment. You're in love with him, aren't you, Somerset? I've had a hell of a time controlling myself around him. Look me dead in the eye. Come on. To ensure obedience, Mavis snagged Eve's chin, swiveled until they were face to face. Glassy eye to glassy eye. You're in love with Rourke. It looks that way. I don't want to think about it. Good. Don't. Always said you thought too damn much. Holding the glass over her head, Mavis pushed off into the lagoon. Can we use the jets? Sure. Impaired with wine, Eve fumbled a bit for the correct control. Once the water started to bubble and spew, Mavis let out a laughing moan. Christ Jesus, who needs a man when you've got one of these? Come on, Eve, bump up the music. Let's party. Obliging. Eve doubled the volume on the controls so that the music screamed off the walls and water. The Rolling Stones, Mavis's favorite classic artists, wailed. Lounged back, Eve laughed as Mavis improvised dance steps and started to send the server droid after another bottle. I beg your pardon, huh? Bleary-eyed, Eve studied the glossy black shoes at the lip of the lagoon. Slowly, and with mild curiosity, she let her gaze travel up the smoke-colored, pipe-stemmed pants, the short, stiff jacket, and into Somerset's stony face. Hey, you wanna take a little dip? Come on in, Somerset. Water lapped around Mavis's waist and dripped cheerfully from her classy breasts as she waved. The more the merrier, he sniffed, his lips curled. Sheer habit had the words dropping out of his mouth like knife-edged ice cubes, but his gaze kept wandering back to Mavis's swirling body. There's a transmission for you, Lieutenant. Apparently you were unable to hear my attempts to inform you. What? Okay, she sniggered, paddled toward the A-link set in the side of the lagoon. Is it Rourke? It is not. It affronted his dignity to shout, but it would have offended his pride to order the music lower. It is dispatch from Comp Central. Even as Eve reached for the A-link, she stopped, swore, then slicked the hair back from her face. Music off, she snapped, and had Meek and his pals echoing into silence. Mavis, stay out of video range, please. Eve sucked in a deep breath, then opened the A-link. Dallas, dispatch, Dallas, Lieutenant Eve. Voice print verified. Report immediately to Broadcast Avenue, Channel 75. Confirmed homicide. Code yellow. Eve's blood ran cold. Her fingers gripped on the edge of the pool. Victim's name. That information is not cleared for transmission at this time. Confirm receipt of orders. Dallas, Lieutenant Eve. Confirmed. ETA 20 minutes. Request Feeney, Captain, EDD on scene. Request verified. Dispatch out. Oh God, oh God. Weak with guilt and liquor, Eve laid her head on the edge of the pool. I fucking killed her. Stop it. Mavis swam over, laid a hand on Eve's shoulder. Cut it out, Eve, she said briskly. He took the wrong bait, Mavis, and she's dead. It was supposed to be me. I said stop it, confused by the words, but not by the sentiment. Mavis pulled her back and gave Eve a quick shake. Snap out of it, Dallas. Helpless, Eve pressed a hand to her spinning head. Oh my Christ, I'm drunk. That's perfect. I can fix that. I've got some sober rap in my bag. At Eve's moan, Mavis gave her another shake. I know you hate pills, but they'll clean the alcohol out of your bloodstream in 10 minutes flat. Come on, we'll get some into you. Fine, dandy. I'll be sober when I have to look at her. She started up the steps, slipped, was surprised to find her arm taken firmly. Lieutenant Somerset's voice was still cool, but he held out the towel and helped her up onto the stone skirt of the pool. I'll see that your car's ready. Yeah, thanks. Chapter 12. Mavis's handy antidote worked like a charm. Eve had a foul taste in the back of her throat, but she was stone cold sober when she reached Chan.